Alright, so let me give you a little video on my tomato plants I got growing and what I'm doing with my tomato plants this year. I didn't really plant any tomatoes out in the garden. I didn't even plant the garden out this year, and the main reason why is because I'm selling my house, and why start the garden if the house sells, and it just doesn't make sense. So I might do it like a mid-season planting with the brassicas, maybe some broccoli, cauliflowers, and I'll do some. I'm not going to do a lot. I'll just do a few of those, and that way I have something to eat in the event if the house doesn't sell, which it very good likelihood it may not sell this year. I'm having problems selling it, so I may end up being here for the long run, so to speak. So if that's the case, I'm going to want to be able to plant something anyway that I can gather up and grow through the fall and maybe into the winter time. So that's where the brassicas and the other stuff is going to come in handy. So anyway, I just wanted to give you a look at what I got going on as far as my tomatoes go, and then I'll give you a pepper update, because that's really all I'm growing this year is peppers and tomatoes. I got a couple other plants coming up. I also got a bunch of volunteers that came up, so maybe I'll give you a recap on those, and we could go look at, but there's not much for me to review this year on tomatoes. So, I mean, I got probably 30 or 40 tomato varieties, and that's it. I'm not really growing too many of them, but they're all good varieties. A lot of them are new, and a lot of different stuff going on with my tomatoes. But I'll show you a couple of them, and I'll talk a little bit what I'm doing with my containers this year, which is a little bit different than what I've been doing in the past. So here we got the mini tomato. We got this from Store Seed, and I figured I'd give it a grow this year and see how they come up and grow, and see if we could get these mini tomatoes to really bring out the full flavor with the best soil. My super soil's in these containers, so hopefully I get some really good tasting tomatoes this year. But as you can see, I did something a little different than I've been doing in the last few years as far as my self-watering containers. So what I did, the reason why you see what you see here is because of I have a chipmunk problem. I also have a rodent problem in the area. We got field mice around here, and they do pretty severe damage to any of your outdoor crops, pretty much. There's really no way to control these things. It's impossible to catch them. My cat can't even catch these things. So it's really outside of your control when it comes to trying to control your vermin on your property. So what the chipmunks were doing is they were going into the containers and they were literally digging holes in the containers, which is bad as it is. But in a few cases, I already caught them digging up the plants. I already found my plants knocked out of the container just about. Literally dig them up. Now they're just starting to get those hair roots on the plant, and they're just getting going. And the last thing you want to do is have your plants dug up by a rodent, for whatever reason it's digging holes in my containers, and ruin your garden. So what I did was I put down, this is why you keep these lids to these containers too. So when you buy these lids for these self-watering containers, make sure you get the blue soft plastic ones. Don't get those really hard, snappy type. Like you could see probably down there, more like those kind of lids. Don't use those lids, because those things are they'll rip your fingernails off trying to get those off, and you got to take these on and off every year. So you want these soft plastic ones because they peel right up. I could pop this off in 2 seconds. So what I did was I cut landscape fabric, which is this stuff right here. And I love landscape fabric for gardening because I can use it in so many different ways on so many different things. It's a very useful product. It allows water to drain, but it also keeps the weed seeds out and keeps the rodents out, and it's just a very good material to work with. So excellent material. And you can buy this stuff relatively pretty cheap. I mean, for $20 or $30 you get this huge roll that'll last you for a few years. And you can see I got 50 of these containers going with tomatoes. So that's a lot of tomatoes we got growing, and at the same time I still have material left over. I still got like still got a roll left, not that much left on it, but I still got a roll left. So even using this with all the stuff I use, I still have material left. It'll last you forever. So what I did was I take this can see it's kind of taut and like a trampoline. I take this material and I spread it across the top, cut a hole in it for my tomatoes, and I bring my tomatoes through the hole, and then I put this lid down and make it very taut. So it keeps the rodents from, discourages them from coming in there and trying to dig. And I used this crushed gravel around my tomatoes, around the base, to fill in the hole and around in here. I didn't fill the whole thing up, but just in the hole, shook it until it settled down, until it made a pile. That way it's really difficult for the chipmunks or other rodents to try to dig in through here to get in, because that'll be even worse than what they were doing before. And so far so good. They completely disappeared. They're no longer bothering my plants anymore. So we solved the problem with the rodents by adding this vapor barrier to the top. Now, I used to use plastic mulch in the beginning. I stopped doing that because the plastic mulch really suffocates the plant to some degree. It causes mold to grow in there and moss and everything else, and it's just not, don't use plastic mulch. You'll see a lot of these videos out on YouTube. They use plastic mulch as a way to seal off the top and keep in moisture. You don't want to do that. You want moisture to get through it. It's got to breathe. Air's got to come in through this thing and give it some kind of fresh air exchange on it, even by the surface of the roots. So this allows that to happen. Plus, when it rains, the rain hits us, it permeates through and it waters it. So keep that in mind. I also did something different with my containers, which I'm going to do another container just to show you how I set up these containers this year. That'll be in another video. I did make some changes to how I'm working this system. It's going to be slightly different, and I'll explain those reasons why I'm making those changes. But as far as the tomatoes go, you can see that I have all this down. There's virtually nothing organic around the tomato plant itself, so that should eliminate or reduce the blight problems that I have here, because blight is very, very bad in this area. We get the early blight, comes in like around the end of June to the end of July. It could be anywhere in that period of time. And once that kicks in, it's just a matter of time before it just wipes your plant out. And you always seem to get like a subpar harvest out of your hard work that you get every year. So we added the insect frass to the soil. We also added some other stuff to the soil, the biology, and hopefully all these things that we're doing will help control this blight situation, at least down to a minimum. And you can see there's a bad leaf on here now. I'll take that one off. It's probably not blight or anything like that, but we're just bug damage maybe, you know. We'll take that off, get that out of there. So by adding the rock as a top mulch and this garden fabric as a top mulch instead of regular organic material, we eliminate the spore problem that could be a potential reason why I'm getting the early blight, and then the late blight kicks in, because I believe the late blight is pretty much an airborne thing, whereas the early blight really starts off from the splashing, and all the other diseases like the black spot septoria, they seems to be coming from a splashing situation. Even when you clip the lower leaves off, like a lot of people tell you to prune off all those lower leaves, even when you prune off all those lower leaves, you're still going to get it anyway. And most of that's coming up because it's rising up from the bottom of the soil to the top of the plant, and it just climbs that plant and kills it off. So hopefully this situation here is going to really do a big change for that problem. Hopefully this year we're going to get some good growth on these plants, and as long as your plant is healthy, you're going to get good tomatoes, and good sized tomatoes, and a good harvest. So that's what we're striving for, is really striving to reduce this blight situation and other tomato disease situation that seems to be occurring. A simple fix like this could probably stop it completely. We'll have to see. We'll monitor it as we go throughout the year, and we'll see how these plants do this year. I also have tomato plants in my greenhouse that are in pots, and we'll see if those start to end up and develop problems, whereas these may not. And this also prevents insects from getting into the soil and laying their eggs and everything too. So this is the way to go as far as I'm concerned. It can breathe, water can pass through, and you can not even worry about it. There's no organic material to help spread the diseases that we get on our tomatoes. So I'll show you a few of them, show you how my tomato plants are doing. So far so good. They're about in here maybe a week, and they picked up quite rapidly from transplant. When I transplant them, they were very small in the pots. These go into the soil maybe about, they go down the stem about, yo big. I didn't plant them real deep this year, but I got them into the soil about yo deep, each one of them. So they're not just surface planted. I made them go deeper. In fact, I didn't even prune off all my lower leaves. I just bury them. Though you shouldn't do that, but I'm in such a rush doing this stuff, I didn't even take the time to do that. I just planted them right in, and we'll pick the leaves off as they get sick and old and getting ready to die. And so we got some healthy plants. Yes, I do have 4 tomato plants planted together. Some people will be like, well, that's no good because now your plant is going to be, one plant is going to be stealing energy from the other plant, and so on and so on. And to some degree, I do agree with you on that. But I'm also one of those people that has the philosophy that plants have a commutative. They have like an effect where they enhance each other's growth. They create competition from one plant to another. And by doing that, they tend to push themselves to reach maximum health and growth potential. And that's my philosophy. Some people would disagree with that. I do believe plant competition is a very important factor in plants. There's also a thing known as companion planting, and companion planting is when you plant other plants with your plants, like tomato plants. They say carrots grow really good as a companion plant with tomatoes, and that's probably true. And the reason why that is because there's something out there known as allelopathy, and it's a science that's not fully developed yet. I've been studying allelopathy for about 8 or 9 years, and maybe even longer than that, actually. I knew what allelopathy was before that. I just didn't really study it. Now I've been studying allelopathy now for, like I say, 8 or 9 years. And when I say study, I don't mean like I'm doing research on it. I fully understand what allelopathy was within the first month of reading information about it. Study, when I say study, I mean I'm actually doing trial and error by growing one plant with another plant, multiple plants together, and I do all of this stuff to see if there is any kind of allelopathic effect between plants. So in my findings with tomatoes, I find that they don't have any allelopathic effect between the same species of plant, and in fact they enhance each other's growth like a companion plant, because they produce, instead of allelopathic effects, they produce anti-allelopathic effects, which is basically a chemical that enhances the other plant to grow. So it's very similar to the concept of companion planting, and that is the idea of companion planting, is one plant, it provides for the other plant to do just as good. It produces a chemical or other, it takes out different nutrients out of the soil that actually allows another plant to grow much better. So this is one of the things that I mean by when I say study, and this is one of the things I do differently than most people. A lot of people would look at this and frown at us and say, you're growing 4 tomatoes in the plant, you're suffocating the pot, they're going to become root bound, they're going to this, they're going to that. You watch as I grow these through the year and how I maintain the plants, and I'm not going to let these get terribly tall, because if I do have to move, I don't want to have to move plants that are 4 or 5 feet tall. They're going to break over in my truck, and we're going to try to keep these somewhat small, and we're going to get them the fruit at a much lower height. Hopefully this does work. We're going to keep them more bushy than we are tall and viney. That's my attempt this year, at least with the ones that are in the container. The other ones that are growing in the greenhouse, I've done videos on those before. They're not as crucial to me. These are all these in these containers are all varieties that pretty much I never grew and I need to review, or I did grow them and I never reviewed them, and they need to be reviewed. All right, so that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. But I'll do a video on allelopathy in the future once I get time to put together a video about what allelopathy is and how it works, and you know, it'll answer a lot of questions for you as to why, when a weed's growing in next to your plant, why that plant just almost dies completely out, and you're just under the assumption that, oh, well, that weed is there, it's taking all the energy from that plant, but you don't really understand why it's doing that. And so I'm going to do a video to explain these things to you so you do understand why one weed in your pot can literally cause your vegetable plant to grow, to stunt, especially when they're in the small stage. Once the plant is really big, one weed isn't going to do a whole lot to the plant. The plant's already established. It's got roots that are 3 feet in the soil. One weed next to it's not going to show that much of an effect, though it does have an effect on it even still, but just not that much. It's when your plants are small like this, competition is great between your plant and another plant. The other plant is releasing a chemical that's allelopathic in nature. It's going to cause your other plants to stunt, and we're trying to prevent that as gardeners, and we want the best early growth on our plants when we're first starting out. That's the most important time for your plant, because that is what's going to give that plant the kinetic energy to grow really fast and tall right through the summer and produce fruit right away. So we need to be like the guard dog by your plants as these plants are coming up and growing. So this is the very most important time for your plants, is when they're young like this. Once they get to 3 or 4 feet tall, they don't really need mommy and daddy anymore. You can kind of let them go off on their own, just pick off the bugs and pick the leaves off with the diseases. They don't need mommy and daddy anymore. But when they're young like this, they need you like their mommy and daddy, and you have to protect them. And you got to do everything you can to help your plants stay healthy. So anyway, here's some of the tomato plants. Here's the Polish paste tomato. Don't know if Polish pesto. Oh, Polish pesto. I did a video on that some time back. I did a review on it. But I don't think I did that video any justice, because I just think that I was able to develop the flavor a little better in my tomato. And now that I've got some super soil, fresh super soil, I do believe that I'm able to develop the flavor of that tomato intensely. So we're going to regrow that, revisit that that tomato variety. We're going to taste test that this year, and hopefully we can really get a delicious tomato out of it. And this is a very interesting tomato. I like this tomato very much, more for the look than anything. I mean, it's a very incredibly color diverse tomato. I really like the look of the tomato itself. So that we're going to be revisiting that one this year. Like I say, I did do a video in the past on it. You could just go into my tomato videos and look up Polish pesto tomato. You'll find my review on the past from it. We're also growing the palca tomato, which is that tomato right there. We are doing that tomato this year, and I'm really looking forward to doing that one. I've been wanting to do the palcas for a while, but I kept going back to some of my older tomatoes to regrow them, and you get to a point where it's I need to move on to newer varieties, and that's where we stand at today. So we're kind of moving away from some of the older varieties. I'll still grow them, I'm just not going to be reviewing them anymore. Right now, my full attention's going on these new varieties like the palca. We're also growing over there the Manzano. Now the Manzano I talked about in some of my other reviews, my fruit reviews. I did some about the Manzano. That is a registered trademark tomato, meaning they only sell to big companies. You're not supposed to grow it. You're not supposed to resell the seeds. I'm not reselling seeds, but I am growing it from seed again to see if I could get some of these Manzanos grown in my soil and give it the best flavor I can get out of that tomato. So we are working on developing better flavor on that tomato. I like them from the store, but there's no way that a store tomato is going to taste better than my garden tomato. I don't care how good they hydroponically grow those tomatoes or whatever. I'm going to show you how to really develop flavor on these tomatoes using the soil I use and everything else. And we got some other tomatoes over there. Let's take a look at some of these tomatoes. Here's a good tomato. Really interested in growing this. This is called the African brown tomato. I seen that and I said, wow, I've never grown a tomato that came from Africa. And I believe that's where this originates from. Its origins come from Africa. That's why it's called the African brown tomato. So I like the brown tomatoes, they're very far and few between to truly find a true brown tomato. And there are a couple out there. Very hard to get seed for brown tomatoes. You really have to do your research if you're going to try to acquire seeds for brown tomatoes. So when I seen the African brown tomato, I said, wow, I've got to try that one. It's a copper tone tomato, slightly on the brown side. It does have like a brick tone color to it, but I've also seen these tomatoes where they were actually a darker brown color. So it's not just brick tone that I seen to the African brown. I looked into the images that I found and some of the stuff I read about it. They can vary quite a bit as far as the color. It really depends on the season, the soil type, and things like that. So the African brown tomato really, really caught my attention. And so I planted 4 seeds. I only got one that came up successful. I think a couple of the others did come up and they damped off. So I'm left with 1 plant in the full 5-gallon container by itself. So we should see some really delicious, healthy African brown tomatoes coming up this year. So that's going to be a good one to review. I think I'm going to do my reviews a little bit differently though this year. Well, my tomato reviews, I'm actually going to show you my plants are actually in individual containers. I can actually pull a container away and then review the plant, pick the tomato fresh, and eat it right there in front of you. I mean, I'll cut it open and everything so you can see it, but we're going to do a little bit different on my tomato reviews. I want to give you some of the plant, and there's reasons for that, because I want you to be able to see the plant type itself, because some plants are tomato leaf, some are regular leaf, some are sawtooth leaf, some are fern leaf. There's a bunch of different varieties of tomatoes I got going this year. So we want to definitely cover some of the tomato plants as well. We're going to make it more comprehensive, as you will. Again, you can see I have my landscape cloth down here. It's very taunt. It's beautiful. It works great. I think the tomatoes are really loving it. I'm looking at the health of my tomatoes this year. They look incredibly healthy this year. I'm very, very pleased so far. So I'm really looking forward to hopefully a really good, healthy harvest. Anything can go wrong between now and harvest time, including storms and animals and birds and diseases and, you know, all the stuff that goes with tomatoes. But from the looks of things right now, they look very good. I'm already beginning to see the glands beginning to come out on the stems, which is an early sign that the plant is beginning to develop resistance. I'm also going to water these with aspirin once they get to around a foot tall, maybe 2 feet tall. I'm going to give it a dose of aspirin, and that'll cause it to start releasing other hormones that'll fight diseases. So we're going to really, really strive to boost this plant's energy up. So that will be one of the things. I think you can water or you spray it on the leaves, one or the other. If you spray it on the leaves and the plant's young like this, you're wasting your time, because the plant's only going to grow more leaves and they're not going to be covered with the aspirin spray. But I think what happens is the tomato plant actually absorbs. It absorbs the spray and it causes the immune response. It's really what we want. We don't care. It's not nutrients we're looking for. So here, what do we have? We have the San Marzano Gigante. Now, this is one that I haven't did a review on. This is going to be, I've grown it for several years, very unsuccessful, because I'm growing so many tomato plants. I can't put a lot of time and energy into each plant like I am this year. This year, I'm really putting my energy and time into my tomatoes to make sure I get a really good harvest and make sure we can get some good video of it. So I never did this one. I've grown it for several years, got 1 or 2 tomatoes out of it, didn't do that good with it. But this year we're going to grow it, and I think we're going to get really healthy plants, and we're going to get a really good harvest this year. So that's one of the ones we're growing here. Let's see what else we got here. This one here is the Galapagos Island, I believe hybrid, right? One's Galapagos Island and one's Galapagos Island hybrid. And what happened was, I grew the Galapagos Island last year, and the Galapagos Island tomato crossed over with one of my other tomatoes. And it did something really strange that I found very unique and different. It's basically a Galapagos Island tomato, but it was about the size of a Galapagos Island tomato, you know, the same size, almost the same color, a little bit more orange. But they were shaped like a regular type of beefsteak tomato, but really tiny. And they were, they tasted really good. I was actually surprised. It kind of tasted like a cross between a regular tomato and a Galapagos Island. Now, Galapagos Island tomatoes have a really unique taste. If you've never grown a Galapagos Island tomato, you definitely have to grow those and try them. They do have their own flavor. It's unlike any other tomato. It's totally different. But I have grown them, and last year it crossed. I guess maybe it crossed either out of the package or it crossed with one of my other tomatoes. I honestly don't have an answer for that. But that's what it did. And it came up with this really strange looking tomato variety, and I was infatuated with it, so I decided to continue it on. I figured this would be something to pursue if I can get this tomato to actually continue to reproduce the same way. So I will be trying to selectively breed that tomato into existence. Now, will it happen every single time? I honestly don't know. I don't think so. But we will try. With tomatoes, it can flip from one year to the other, you know, and you have to grow like 100 plants of that tomato that you're trying to selectively breed out, so you get that 1 or 2 tomatoes that do come up that stay true. So you may have to grow as many as 100 of that same plant. I simply don't have the room here to do that. That's why I don't do it very often. You're almost wasting your time doing just 4 plants or 5 plants of that variety and do it. You're wasting your time. You really want to do like 100 plants. All right, so we have over here, I got to move these tags over to where I can actually read them. This is so tight around here. I made this thing so tight that I can't even get the tags in there. We got the yellow brandywine. I've grown this a couple times. Didn't have a whole lot of success with it. It really needs to be in a pot like this with good soil, and really needs a lot of attention. You got to be around it, and once it gets going into the tomato stage, then you're fine. But I mean, up until that point, you really got to baby these plants to get them to be really productive and healthy. And so right now it's going to need my attention, and that's why we got it up front here instead of in a greenhouse in the pot. We have it here. So this is the yellow brandywine. We also got, I'm growing this one this year. This is a Indeterminate variety. This is called the Celebration tomato. It's basically a slicer, and it's a red tomato. It's not special, but it is a Indeterminate variety, and I really don't grow that many Indeterminate tomatoes. But this year we're going to grow 1 or 2, I think I got Indeterminate. So we'll give this one a go this year. We'll see how it develops and produces fruit. If I like it, I might grow it again next year. We'll have to see. And I've also read, too, that sometimes Indeterminate tomatoes don't always stay determinate. They could grow on and on depending on the health of the plant and how you prune it. If you continuously prune a Indeterminate tomato, from what I understand, it could produce fruit pretty much all year like a Indeterminate tomato. So pruning has a lot to do with it. What else we got going here? We have the Glacier Tomato. I've grown this for several years. Again, didn't do very successful with this one because this tomato is a very meticulous, particular type of tomato. It really don't like hot weather per se. Does not like hot weather. And if you're growing this and it's a really hot summer, you're not going to do that good. Main reason why I'm growing it in a container up here this year rather than a greenhouse is I could move this tomato out of the sunlight and put it into more of a shady area where this tomato will actually do pretty good. So we are definitely going to keep our eye on this tomato, and we're going to get some good tomatoes off it regardless of the season, because I can put it into a partial shady area where it's not going to get abused by the sun, because this tomato doesn't like too hot of sun. That's why they call it the Glacier Tomato. It likes cooler weather and partial sunlight. And I'll show you 1 or 2 more and we're done. We'll end this video. This is the Jasper tomato. I do believe this is a Indeterminate variety, not an Indeterminate. I could be wrong. I'll put the correct information in the description once I review the tomato. This again is a slicer type tomato. It's a very desirable tomato from what I've read. It's a lot of people seek this tomato out to grow it year in and year out. So it is a very desired variety. So we are growing the Jasper tomato. And last but not least that I'll show you today is the orange banana tomato. And the orange banana tomato I had grown in the past, and I'd done really good with it in the past. I have gotten a whole bunch of them, and I never reviewed it. I never reviewed the tomato, even though I had all these tomatoes that came off the plants. I mean, I got bunches of them. And ever since then, I never did that good with it again. It just didn't do that good, this tomato. So I'm basically running out of seeds for it, and I really need to get this variety reestablished. And sorry about that. I really need to get this variety reestablished and get some fresh seeds from this, and then I can grow it. Now, from what I remember last year, they were very tasty tomatoes, and they really looked strange. They had a really, when they call it an orange banana, it almost looks like an orange banana. It's a very strange looking tomato. So I definitely don't want to lose this variety just from lack of putting my attention to my vegetables this year. So we're going to grow this one out, we're going to review it, and we'll take a look at the whole plant and how the tomatoes are doing on it this year. All right, so I guess that's it. That's all we're going to do for today with the tomatoes. I'll give you another update once these plants get a little bigger, and then maybe I'll take you for a full tomato tour, and we'll go from there. All right, so don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you on the next one. Take care.